G'day YouTube. Warbles on a lot here. Barnaby's back. He's resurrected. What shall we do with Barney, baby? What shall we do with Barney, baby? What shall we do with Barney, baby? Now he's resurrected. Barnaby's choice for the Nationals is to take the Kamikaze option. I'd show you the electoral pamphlet that hit my mailbox last week from him. Pretty much blowing the bugle and banging the war drums because of the sudden, surprising rise of China. But I used it for firelighters. His first two acts as Deputy Prime Minister, which is what he gets as being leader of the National Party, his first act was to stick his head up above the parapet and stake the future of Australia on preserving the jobs of coal miners. Now, the jobs of coal miners pretty much only exist because China, who he railed against in his electoral pamphlet, keeps buying Australian coal with which to smelt the Australian iron ore with which they make the steel for all their lovely big new battleships and war weapons, paraphernalia, bridges, reinforcement in concrete, all of the things you need steel for. Australia sends it all. And Barnaby's best mate, Gina Farts Rhinestones, she's one of the richest women on the planet, maybe richest people on the planet. No, I think Jeff Bezos has got a knack of there. But anyway, she makes her fortune selling iron ore and coal to the Chinamen. And she's one of Barnaby's biggest financial backers. So he's kind of tripping over himself in his mixed messages and his diametrically opposed attacks on his own interests. But yeah, Barnaby wants to keep selling coal to the rest of the world. Whether the rest of the world wants to buy coal or not is another thing. But he does say that he's going to be guided by the party room opinion. It's not going to be Barnaby's opinion. It's going to be everybody's opinion. So he either thinks he can crack the whip and make them stand in line, or he's flying a false flag because he expects to be voted down or spoken down in the party room by people who say, oh, no, Barnaby, no. The whole world's moving against coal and we have to move with the times because there's no point saying that we've got lots of coal and we're good at digging it up if nobody wants to buy it. It's just fucking unwanted black dirt if nobody wants to buy coal. And, you know, the times, they are a changeling. Within the last month, the Dutch Supreme Court of Appeals, I think, has ruled, so there's no more discussion or decision. The final decision has come in. The Dutch court has ruled against Royal Dutch Shell and said that the Dutch Shell Corporation is responsible for the damage caused by the greenhouse gases emitted by all of the customers who buy their products and burn them and emit the carbon to the atmosphere. And the court has said Royal Dutch Shell has to stop doing that, pay fines, you know. Within days, the shareholders of the American Chevron oil company, they voted to direct the chairman of the board and the managing director and the chief executive officer to divest their corporation's holdings in fossil fuel enterprises. Chevron oil getting out of fossil fuels. The natural gas that Australia has been loudly planning on selling overseas for the next 20 or 30 years till we get it all out of the ground and sell it to somebody else to burn, that's suddenly become very unfashionable because everybody around the world has realised that not only does it still have a lot of carbon in it, but it also creates a lot of nitrous oxide, which does horrible bloody damage to other parts of the environment. So, yeah, Barnaby's apparently hitched his wagon to a falling star in terms of fossil fuels. But then last night, yesterday, today, a National Party senator moved amendments in the Senate to the Murray-Darling Basin redrafting bill that would effectively forever cease all further government buybacks and would entitle the farmers, anytime there's a drought, to have priority over the environment and to raid environmental water flows for the purposes of maintaining their irrigation fantasy. And I say fantasy because ever since the Babylonians discovered salination following irrigation, there's been a simple mnemonic that if irrigation exceeds precipitation, then salination is inevitable. So irrigation in inland Australia with water out of the river so that you can put more water on the ground than the sky does with rain. It's just a great way to turn, literally sow salt on your own fields, because the river water is saltier than the rainwater. Fact of life. Happily, the Liberal Party and the Labor Party and the Greens combined in the Senate to vote down the National Party's attempt to cripple the Murray-Darling Basin water allocation bill. And somebody from Barneybaby's party suggested that it didn't matter that they'd lost the vote because it sent a message. It sent a message that the National Party is going to stick up for the farmers' rights and the farmers' interest. And it doesn't fucking matter what the farmers want. What they fucking want is for the weather patterns to go back to being what they were 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, when it was kind of sort of more or less reliable that you'd get, 2 or 3 good years out of every 10. Now you're lucky to get one friggin' normal year in 10 years. The farmers have to face the fact that we live on a planet, and the planet has an atmosphere, and the atmosphere has chemistry, and there are thermodynamics at work, and some chemicals are better at trapping heat than others, and carbon dioxide is really, really good at it. And the fact is that our grandparents' generation has eaten our lunch. They were able to expand their economy, to make more and grow more and get richer every year forever. And my children's generation is pretty much the first generation that's come along in Australia for a very long time who has very little prospect of being as well off and able to live the life of leisure as their parents' generation. And my generation look at our parents and we think, my God, you guys really, you sucked all the goodness out of the world and left us a kind of a smoking, ruined wreck. Well, Barnaby's philosophy is to strip mine the wreckage and then subdivide it and sell it to fucking idiots from the city who are looking for somewhere to go and do a tree change. Just keep on farming until there's nothing left of the ecology of the biosphere. And he probably thinks that then they'll go to Mars and terraform the surface of Mars or something. Or maybe because of his strict, strong Catholic upbringing, and I know about that because I went to a Catholic boarding school with Barneybaby's big brother Christopher from Danglemar. Tiny little dairy farming town south of Tamworth. Anyway, I know he got a big hefty dose of Christianity because he and his brother Christopher come out of the same bloody dairy farming family in the same little valley. And Christopher Joyce was so incredibly pious. He loved his religion and practicing the rituals so much that he used to actually pay me so that I could stay in bed at 6 o'clock in the morning when he was getting up to go and serve as an altar boy for the 6 o'clock mass for the De La Salle brothers every morning, because the kids in first form, or these days would be year 7, they used to get put on a roster. And as a lapsed Presbyterian at a Catholic boarding school, I had no idea what you were supposed to do, and I had no fucking wish or desire or intention of learning how to serve as an altar boy at a Catholic mass. So this pious dickhead, there was another one as well. He come from Wollongong. But they bid themselves up to the point where they were paying me, I think it was 5 cents per day to let them have my turn. So Barneybaby Joyce, he comes from a very pious Christian Catholic household. It's possible that he expects that there'll be a theological intervention that'll save the world, something akin to the rapture. And because God's always on his side, so he says, all will be forgiven. See, that's why family values and what you say versus what you do, that doesn't matter to people like Barnaby, because God's on his side. So it may be one of those karmic things where Barnaby Joyce and Tony Abbott, between them, have had more to do with making Australia cling on to the path of burning fossil fuels and exporting coal at all costs for the last 20 odd fucking years. I mean, John Howard was prepared to have a carbon tax. And because the Labor government was going to go ahead with the carbon tax that Johnny Howard wanted to have, because the politicians back in the 90s had worked out that the scientists aren't a bunch of fools. They are not stupid. They know what they're talking about. We either put a tax on carbon and make it really expensive to burn a lot of carbon, no matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter if that blows your cost profit analysis out of the water. It's the only way to send a price signal that causes people to not burn carbon for frivolous reasons. The people who burn diesel in a truck towing a trailer full of horses from one end of the country so the horses can run around in fucking circles and see who goes nowhere first, second or third. Let's bet on the trifecta. Other people do it with turning dogs. They call them turning dogs because they turn good money into dog shit. Only first you buy the dog food and the vet fees and the special shampoo and the vitamins, and you feed all that to the dog, and what you get is a pile of shit that you have to shovel up and pick up afterwards. It's all got to stop. There is no way to rapidly electrify the transport industry. Sorry, but can't be fucking done. So a lot of stuff has to stop very suddenly. And guess what? My state member of parliament, Adam Marshall, New South Wales Minister for Agriculture, who reckoned he was going to apply a figurative virtual napalm called bromodiolone to the New South Wales mouse plague. He's now tested positive for COVID Delta, and he's asymptomatic, but he's self-isolating. New South Wales Health Minister Brad Hazzard, he's self-isolating because he's a suspected close contact of somebody who's positive for COVID Delta. And yesterday, as I was driving along, listening to the ABC over the radio, I heard that in India they've isolated 22 cases across 3 different states of what they call COVID Delta Plus. And I think the equation goes something like this. It's not arithmetic, it's a geometric progression. The original COVID-19, everybody who got COVID-19, they might infect, I think it was 1.3 people. So it picked up speed as it went, slowly at first, but it rapidly picked up speed. Then there was the Alpha variant, COVID-19A, and that's the one that came out of England, and it was about 60% more transmissible. So it rapidly outcompeted the original COVID-19. And then there are several other types. There's a Brazilian and there was a South African. And the Indian variant they call the COVID Delta, it's 60% more transmissible than the English COVID Alpha, which was 60% more transmissible than the original COVID. Now the Indians have found another variant of concern called COVID Delta Plus. And it may be that the Chinese were perhaps terrified of what might come out of the bats that live in their caves. So instead of just leaving the bats to get along with their day, they've gone out there and captured some bats and decided to catalogue all of the viruses that the bats have got. Maybe, perhaps, possibly, the bats' viruses were better at escapology than the Chinese virologists were at keeping viruses where they're supposed to be kept. Could have been a good case of don't fucking annoy a stressed out bat. But I find it interesting that last time I made a video showing off the bats that come and visit me. I was chainsawing in the rain, and shortly after that they had a COVID outbreak in Victoria which locked them down for 111 days. You can look it up in my videos. I think the title goes something like Endangered Bats as House Guests. Well, this morning, I got a phone call from a mate of mine who lives 50 k's away, and he's got a daughter who is not quite a next door neighbour of mine. She lives on the other side of me next door neighbour. And he'd had I think it was a debriefing telephone call from his daughter, you know, boo-hoo, sob, there's all this wrong. And he got the idea that she urgently needed a delivery of firewood in order to make her life better. And yeah, it was raining, and I thought, well, yeah, I suppose if the positions were reversed, if my daughter was living down there a similar distance from where he is, and if I heard from her that, you know, everything had turned pear-shaped and she was miserable in the rain with 2 kids and no firewood, I would probably ring somebody like that particular old mate of mine. So, and I would expect him to pick up the task and say, yeah, it's raining, but I'll fix it for you. So I agreed to that. So I felt very virtuous as I was wandering around in the rain, felled 2 trees and burnt up a tank of fuel, cutting up 2 branches, one on each tree to get a mixed load, and that way you wind up with what we used to call in the old days widow's wood, so that a woman living on her own doesn't have to split any wood. There's enough little small bits to, you know, with a firelighter, start a fire, and then as the branch gets bigger, you got the progressively bigger bits, but you still don't give her anything that needs an axe being put into it to fit it into the firebox. So yeah, I got some pretty good. When I got over there and I found that, yeah, well, they had a visitor in the house. They were eating pancakes and cream and strawberries, and the fire was going in the kitchen and the fire was going in the lounge room, and there was probably as much wood undercover, as dry wood undercover, as I had showed up with wet in me trailer. So I got to feel like a good bloke, and I still feel like a good bloke, but it means that this morning I had the experience of, I'm going to be going out in the rain chainsawing. I probably should wear a jacket for that. So I looked at my chainsawing in the rain jackets, and I looked at the grey, overcast, drizzly sort of a day, and I thought, I wonder if I've been visited by the local bat colony. So I was very careful as I uncovered. I've only got one little bat there, a bent-winged pipistrelle. So my theory that if the Chinaman's Wuhan horseshoe bat virus decides to come here and annoy me, I do actually have a gate guard standing at my front door to keep me safe. Put a leash on the bloody wandering little virus, if needs be. Perhaps to testify to the great collective virus god in the sky that, listen, you know, like, it's pretty nice having a human keep an emergency outlanding for 30 odd years in the middle of the forest, so that if we get stuck under clouds when day arrives suddenly, we've got somewhere to go. So I don't know how the COVID-19 Delta is going to go when it gets here, because it probably will. You know, I've heard of 18 seconds worth of exposure, no, 18 seconds difference in the time between doors opening on a corridor and people catching it room to room through the corridor. People are talking 5 or 10 metre approach distances crossed on the footpath. No actual slow down, stoppage, talking to one another, no shouting, no close proximity, catching it. Yeah, I think this one's going to go pretty good, and they haven't got any clear idea yet whether it's any more deadly, but it is more contagious. That's the thing about the Indian version, the new Indian version, the COVID Delta Plus. They think that it might be pretty much proof against the vaccines because it suppresses your immune function as well as doing all those other things that COVID-19 does. So yeah, Barnaby Joyce's Machiavellian machinations to get himself back in the seats of power, in the halls of power, clinging onto the reins of power just as it all goes to shit. Don't know whether you've seen any footage coming out of America as to how dry it is and how hot it is and how terrified their firefighters are. They're getting ready for a much worse fire season than they've ever seen before, because they went into the bushfire season with less water than they normally come out of it with. Their winter snows completely failed them. All their reservoirs are empty. Temperatures are out through the top of the thermometer, and they got no water to generate power, clean cars, water lawns, grow irrigation crops, maintain fish broodstock and hatcheries, or sustain the riverine environment. Whole west coast of America getting cooked and scorched like we were back when Barnaby was the Minister for Water, and all of the fish were dying in the Murray-Darling Basin. And yeah, thankfully he was stopped from torpedoing the Murray-Darling Basin Agreement last night. But I have great hopes that he will be so intransigent, so recalcitrant, so counterfactual in his demands that Australia continue pretending that global warming is a hoax, which is what Barnaby wants to believe, because I'm pretty sure he must have decided that it's got to be a hoax, because if it was real, then we'd have to change everything about how we do stuff. And he doesn't want to change everything about how we do stuff. He just wants to move onward and upward into untouched wilderness and bulldoze the fucking lot of everything and push the established ecology right out to the corner of the paddock so that he can grow one single artificial plant species, either for sale to market directly or as a feedstock for one single artificial animal species. He's got a mindlessly industrial, rapacious view of the landscape. He thinks the whole biosphere was put on Earth so that entrepreneurs could trash it for hire, for reward, for profit, for wages, for power, for prestige, for wealth, for glory, and for the sheer fucking fun of it. Just for the fun of it, wielding and exercising a destructive power. So, Adam Marshall's got COVID Delta, and Barnaby wants to go right back to about 1880 in terms of, well, as he put it, you can't pay any attention to the environmental scientists, because if you paid any attention to what they say, you'd never get anything done in Australia, anyhow, anywhere, anyway. And he's right, because European broadacre agriculture flies in the face of all the scientific evidence of how to live sustainably on the continent of Australia. European farming is designed to create a lifeless desert. That's just a fact of life, you know, like crack a biology textbook for once, Barnaby. Crack a biology textbook for once, instead of being an accountant among farmers. But anyway, whoops. Wouldn't life be horrible if you didn't have a friendly local bat to keep you company? Has to be fed small pieces often. And it's all wood that died in the drought. Which has been air dried, standing up. If I don't buy it, oh sorry, burn it, I'll give it to somebody like, well, I've given a couple of loads to my daughter and now I've given one to old mate's daughter. It's only going to turn into a bushfire fuel bomb come the spring. So that was my day. Coming to terms with Barnaby's choice to lead the National Party in a kamikaze dive down the gurgly hole of unmitigated global warming. Because that is his plan. That is his plan. Like I said, hopefully enough of the people in the Liberal Party will be so firmly welded to the idea of making money out of the change from carbon-fueled economy to renewable energy economy that the Liberal Party will split off rather than be dragged into an absolute folly led by Barnaby. And once you split the Liberal Party and the National Party and they don't have a coalition, then you don't have much of a problem with Labor winning an election. The only thing that's kept Labor out of power for decades, for generations in Australia, is the fact that the Liberal Party, and the only liberty that they care about is the liberty, two of them. One is the liberty to treat the working class like shit, and the other is the liberty to trash the landscape. In any development application or proposal, the underlying bedrock starting point assumption is that if you can make money out of it, then there's an economic benefit, and economic benefit is more important and a higher priority than any kind of environmental concerns over damage incurred in the generation of the quote profit. Well, the environment is pushing back. The Gaia principle has had a gutful. The bat eater's lament virus is loose and it's stalking the world, and it doesn't really matter how it got out of its cave in China. It got spread around the world by the international airline tourism industry. And anybody who keeps banging the drum about rebooting the tourism and travel and transport industry, they've missed the point of the fucking exercise. Because the point of the exercise is that the rest of the biosphere has had a gutful of humans making shit get worse. So the rest of the biosphere is joining forces to make humans become scarce. And the first thing to do is stop us from travelling and stop us from gathering and stop us from burning fossil fuels for frivolous fucking stupid reasons. Oh, let's go to Tokyo and look at the Olympics. Who can kick a ball or hit it or beat it with a stick the fastest? Who can run in circles going nowhere the fastest? Who can swim in circles? God almighty. For this they want to trash the fucking Earth? They want to turn planet Earth into Venus because they think they can terraform Mars and get away from the consequences of their actions. 12,000 years of accumulated consequences of the broadacre death, cult of harvest, everythingism. Yep. That's pretty much that's where Barnaby's trying to lead. Humanity is currently up to its nose in a hole full of shit, and Barnaby Joyce wants to keep digging faster and more efficiently. Barnaby's Choice. National Party Kamikaze attack. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. That's how I see it. Ciao.